If you've been in any fiber art spaces and online in the last week, you've probably seen some people being outraged about a Discord server sharing paid patterns. I believe this spawned from a TikTok comment on one of the hot take videos that was going around about a month ago, regarding specifically the Sophie scarf by Petite Knit. The original poster didn't want to spend $5 on an incredibly basic garter stitch scarf with an I-cord edge, and honestly, I can't blame them. I also refuse to pay for super basic patterns like that. Since then, there's been a lot of discourse surrounding this server. There's designers who are upset that their hard work is being stolen. There's lower income knitters who are happy that they are able to access patterns that they otherwise would not be able to afford. There are some people justifying sharing one designer's patterns over another based on how popular or how big that designer's business is. There are people clutching their pearls over how other knitters could possibly resort to theft and saying that people should just look for free patterns that are close enough to the finished object that they want. I think my favorite are the people jokingly asking, "What's the server so I can make sure that I never go there?" While a designer cannot copyright a design, at least in the US and I believe in most of the European Union as well, they can copyright their written pattern and any photos included inside the pattern or that they've taken and put on social media. The exact words that the designers used in their pattern and the order in which they put them are copyrightable, and sharing those words to an entire Discord server is violating their copyright. While I generally agree that a lot of patterns are way too expensive for what they are, I do also agree that sharing the full paid pattern is theft. There are free patterns that are similar, but oftentimes there are no free patterns that are exactly the same as the paid pattern. However, there's another discussion happening within this discourse that I really want to add my 2 cents into, and that is it right to reverse engineer a pattern instead of paying for it? Since the design itself cannot be copyrighted, I say reverse engineering is fair game, and it's honestly a lot easier than one may think. What is reverse engineering? According to the Oxford Dictionary, reverse engineering is the reproduction of another manufacturer's product following detailed examination of its construction or composition. So this is looking very closely at an object and creating it on your own. In the fiber arts world, this can be done with just a little bit of effort and resourcefulness. Let's start with the easiest options for determining how a pattern is made. Just by looking at the Ravelry page for the Sophie scarf, we can see that it, quote, is worked back and forth in one piece from tip to tip in garter stitch with built-in I-cord edges. This tells us that the scarf is made in one piece, mostly in garter stitch, with an I-cord edge on either side. If we move to the projects for this scarf, we can click Advanced and then sort by Most Helpful. These are the projects with notes that the most Ravelry users have marked as helpful. In many cases, these notes will give you everything that you need to know. By scrolling through these projects, I determined that the Sophie scarf has a 3-stitch I-cord edge on either side. It's increased every 8 rows until the scarf is as wide as you'd like it to be, typically between 24 and 36 stitches, and uses a knit front and back increase, although many knitters seem to have replaced that with either a make one left or a make one right. Now that we know the basic techniques used to make this scarf, we can look up free tutorials for these techniques. So, for example, I was not sure how to do an I-cord edge that you make as you knit, as I had only ever done I-cord bind-offs or attached I-cords done after the full piece had been finished. This is where Google is our friend. You can simply Google I-cord edge knitting and scroll until you find a tutorial or a blog post that has the exact technique that you're looking for. I found this one by the Devious Knitter that I really enjoyed. If you aren't sure how to make an increase, you can Google for all of the options. Knit front and back is likely the easiest, and you will see that abbreviated as KFB. But it can also create a weird extra bump, so you may want to exchange it for either a make one left or a make one right. There are hundreds of blog posts, YouTube videos, or TikTok tutorials for each type of increase, so you can look at them all and pick one that you prefer. Let's look at another popular knitting pattern, the Musselburgh hat. I've made a few Musselburghs, but I've never bought the pattern. It's just a tube of stockinette with flat squares on either side. While I have heard that the pattern is extremely comprehensive, and a lot of people feel that it is worth the money to have the math already done for them for multiple yarn weights, I personally do not think that it's worth the $7 for me. If we go through the Ravelry projects again, we can filter for the yarn weight that we want to use, and look through those projects and see how many stitches the different knitters had. We can see that most are using a pinhole cast on, increase to a certain number of stitches, knit in stockinette until the hat is 10 to 12 inches long. Then, if they're going for a color blocked option, they'll switch to another color. The increases seem to typically be around 2 to 3 inches. So they will knit until the tube is 2 to 3 inches shorter than the finished length that they want. Then they work the decreases. Some projects include exactly how long they made each section for a scrappier, more color blocked option. We can then Google how to make a flat square. Generally, you'll be on 4 double-pointed needles, and you'll knit 1 round flat plain knit, and then 1 round increasing on either end of each DPN. Using this information, you can easily make your own Musselburgh hat. I have seen some people who are against reverse engineering in any form. I've seen people in this discourse saying that it is theft, just like sharing the actual paid pattern. I'm also in a few fiber art spaces online that explicitly forbid anyone from explaining how to reverse engineer projects, saying that people should just pay for the pattern or find one that fits what they were looking for. Remember, a design cannot be copyrighted. A stitch pattern cannot be copyrighted. And a technique cannot be copyrighted. While sharing a paid pattern to an entire Discord server is clearly wrong, using your skills to create a knitted object just by looking is not. I think it's an incredibly valuable skill that all fiber artists should have. This is how a lot of people learned, including myself. This idea that a designer owns their design and anyone trying to emulate that design is incredibly new in the fiber art scene. I know some of the older women in my knitting group had no idea that this was controversial, because that's how they learned. So I attest that reverse engineering is good, actually. Learning how to identify a stitch pattern by sight is an incredibly useful skill. In addition to using it to reverse engineer things, you can use it to identify if a pattern is in a stitch that you hate making. For example, I'm currently working on something that has twisted stitch cables, and now I know that if I ever see any other project that has twisted stitch cables, I am going to steer very far away from them because I find that very tedious and it's making my hands hurt. You could use this skill to mend an antique Afghan with a matching stitch. You could help a friend with a project without having to see the full pattern for yourself. Being able to break a finished object down into its parts is also a very useful skill, and it can make bigger projects seem less intimidating. That isn't an entire sweater. That's 5 rectangles sewn together. That isn't an impossible AI rendering. It's a series of spheres and cylinders. Being able to reverse engineer is also the first step towards creating your own patterns. You can imagine something that you want to create and then make it without sacrificing your vision. You don't have to hunt for a pattern that's close enough to what you want and settle for it. No. You can make exactly what you pictured in your mind's eye. Think of reverse engineering as an advanced version of reading your knitting. It is a foundational skill, and you can apply it to many different projects. Reverse engineering is an important skill for all fiber artists. We can use it to recreate that pattern that we think is not worth the money without going in and stealing the actual pattern or having someone who did buy it share it with the entire internet. We can use it to break down pre-patterns into ways that are easier for us to understand. When the Betty McKnit 6-day star blanket controversy was happening a few months ago, I was kind of flabbergasted by how many people would prefer to rewrite an entire pattern instead of looking for a different base star blanket pattern and then just transposing double crochets and granny clusters onto it. As we see more and more AI slop clogging Pinterest and Etsy, reverse engineering will also become more and more useful to be able to create these objects. Building a community within the fiber arts world is more important than any one person's pocketbook. Being able to share skills and create together without gatekeeping or being afraid of stepping on anyone's toes is what fiber arts are all about. We can create these objects and share our skills and our techniques without having to infringe on someone's intellectual property and violating their copyright. Have you seen this discourse going around on TikTok or Reddit or Facebook pages? Do you agree that reverse engineering is a way better option than stealing someone's copyrighted materials? Do you think that reverse engineering is exactly the same? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. And if you want to see more knitting and crochet talk, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.